My name is James Carter. I was just an ordinary man living an ordinary life. I worked hard, provided for my family, and found joy in the little things. Sunday afternoons spent fishing with my son, the scent of my wife's fresh-baked apple pie wafting through our home, and quiet evenings reading my favorite passages from the Bible. But for weeks before that fateful day, I felt unsettled. It was like a shadow followed me, though I couldn't see it. I began having vivid dreams of people I'd never met, faces, some familiar, some strange, calling out to me, whispering words I couldn't understand. And then one night, I woke up with a jolt, drenched in sweat, as a voice echoed in my mind. Prepare for what's coming. Little did I know, I was about to embark on a journey that would take me beyond this world, to a place where justice is eternal and truth shines brighter than any earthly light. And there I would meet someone who forever changed the way I see my purpose in this life. Martin Luther King. It was an unremarkable Monday morning, or so I thought. I had just stepped out of the house, coffee mug in hand, the air crisp with the promise of spring. The birds sang their familiar melodies, and the sun cast a warm glow across the neighborhood. My heart was filled with a quiet gratitude for life's simple blessings, but within minutes, everything would change. As I started the car, a sudden, searing pain gripped my chest. It was unlike anything I'd ever felt, sharp, fiery, as though a vice had locked around my ribs. I gasped for air, but none came. My vision blurred, and the mug slipped from my hand, shattering on the pavement. Panic surged through me. Not now, I whispered, clutching my chest. My thoughts raced. My wife, my son. Would they find me like this? I tried to cry out, but the words caught in my throat. The world around me began to fade, the vibrant colors of life draining away like watercolors washed in a storm. And then, silence. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my car anymore. In fact, I wasn't anywhere I recognized. At first, I thought I might be dreaming. I felt weightless, as though the gravity that had always tethered me to the earth had released me. Looking down, I saw myself. My lifeless body slumped in the car seat, motionless. I should have felt fear, but instead, a strange calm washed over me, like the embrace of an old friend. There was a gentle hum all around me, a sound that was neither loud nor soft, but infinitely soothing, like a lullaby sung by the universe itself. Before I could make sense of what was happening, a light appeared in the distance. It wasn't just any light. It was alive. It pulsed and shimmered, colors I'd never seen swirling within it. It was warm, inviting, and impossibly beautiful. Something deep within me knew this light. It was calling me, drawing me closer, like a child being welcomed home. As I moved toward it, I passed through a realm that defied description. The air, or what I thought was air, sparkled with energy. Vibrations of love, peace, and harmony resonated through me. I saw figures, beings of light, glowing softly, their presence exuding kindness and wisdom. They didn't speak, but their thoughts flowed into mine like a river of understanding. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the journey paused. I found myself standing in a place that was neither earth nor heaven, a threshold between worlds. The ground beneath me glowed faintly, and the sky was an endless expanse of light. A figure approached, walking with a purposeful grace. At first, I couldn't make out who it was, but as they came closer, recognition struck me like a bolt of lightning. His face was one I'd seen countless times, in history books, in documentaries, in speeches that had moved nations. It was Martin Luther King. He stood before me, not as the man I'd seen in photographs, but as something greater. He radiated a strength and serenity that words could never fully capture. His presence was overwhelming, yet comforting, like meeting a long-lost mentor who had been waiting for you all along. "Welcome, brother," he said, his voice resonating with a power that seemed to echo through the very fabric of existence. I wanted to speak, to ask a million questions, but my voice wouldn't come. He seemed to sense my thoughts and smiled gently. "You've been brought here for a reason. There is much to understand, and even more to reveal." As he gestured for me to follow, the landscape around us began to shift, transforming into scenes that would show me the profound truths about life, justice, and the spiritual battles that shape our world. I didn't know it yet, but this encounter would change everything I believed about the purpose of my life and the forces at work in the world beyond our sight. The moment I stepped forward alongside Dr. King, the very air seemed to change. It wasn't like walking on earth. The ground beneath us pulsed with a soft, golden light, as though the very essence of life itself thrummed within it. Every step sent ripples of energy outward, each one carrying a sense of peace and purpose. Around us, the horizon stretched infinitely, not bound by the rules of space and time. The sky was a kaleidoscope of living colors, shifting and blending in ways no earthly painter could imagine. Shades of gold, sapphire, and amethyst danced like the strokes of an artist's brush, creating a symphony for the eyes. And then there was the sound. It wasn't noise in the earthly sense, it was harmony, an all-encompassing resonance. It was as if the universe itself was singing, every note vibrating with love, hope, and infinite wisdom. It filled me with a peace I couldn't describe, yet deep within, there was also a growing sense of anticipation. As we walked, Dr. King glanced at me, his eyes filled with compassion. "This is a place where truth is revealed," he said, his voice carrying an authority that resonated deep in my soul. "You've been called to see what lies beyond human understanding. But first, you must listen." Before I could ask what he meant, the light ahead of us grew brighter, more intense. It wasn't blinding, but powerful, as though it held the sum of all knowledge and love. From the brilliance, a figure began to emerge. At first, I could only make out the outline of the being, but as the light softened slightly, I saw him. The figure stood tall, robed in pure white that shimmered like a river of stars. His face was radiant, glowing with a light that seemed to emanate from his very being. His eyes were unlike anything I'd ever seen, deep and piercing, filled with both the weight of eternity and the gentleness of endless compassion. I knew in that instant who he was. It was Jesus. I fell to my knees instinctively, overwhelmed by his presence. Tears streamed down my face, not out of fear, but out of awe. I could feel the weight of my own imperfection, yet at the same time, I was enveloped by a love so pure and unconditional that it washed away every fear and doubt. "Rise, child," he said, his voice like a melody that both calmed and commanded. It wasn't just a sound, it was a force that seemed to reach into the deepest parts of my soul. "You are here because there is a message that must be shared. Time is short, and the world must remember what justice truly means." I stood, though my legs trembled beneath me. "Lord," I managed to whisper, "why me? I am no one special." Jesus smiled, and in that smile I felt the reassurance of 1,000 lifetimes. "It is not about who you are, but about who I am," he said. "Through the least of these, my greatest works are revealed." What you see here today will not only transform your life, but the lives of those who hear your story." He gestured, and the space around us shifted once more. We were suddenly in what appeared to be a grand hall, vast and endless, filled with beings of light. Angels, their forms glowing with an ethereal brilliance, moved with purpose, their wings shimmering like silver flames. Some sang, their voices blending into the celestial harmony that filled the air, while others stood as if waiting for instructions. At the center of the hall was a massive scroll, unfurled and glowing with golden text that seemed to move and shimmer as though alive. "This," Jesus said, pointing to the scroll, "is the record of justice. Every act, every word, every thought is written here. But humanity has forgotten the true meaning of justice. It is not vengeance, it is restoration. It is not power, it is love in action." Dr. King, standing beside me, spoke then. His voice was steady but filled with urgency. "I was sent to remind the world of this truth in my time, but the work is far from over. Too often, justice is corrupted by pride, by greed, by the desire for control, but true justice flows from the heart of God." As I listened, images began to appear around me, visions of the world as it is and as it could be. I saw the pain of the oppressed, the cries of the forgotten, the anger and division that have consumed so many. But then I saw something else, glimpses of hope, people standing together, breaking chains of hatred and fear, reaching out to one another in love and unity. Jesus turned to me, his eyes filled with both sorrow and hope. "The world teeters on the edge, but there is still time. Go back and tell them. Show them what you have seen. Tell them that justice begins with the heart and is made perfect through love." I nodded, though the weight of the responsibility felt immense. "I will, Lord," I said, my voice trembling. "But how will they believe me?" He smiled again, and the light around him seemed to grow even brighter. "It is not your job to make them believe. It is only your job to tell the truth. The rest is in my hands." With those words, the vision began to fade, but the message burned within me, clear and undeniable. I had been given a glimpse of eternity, and now it was my task to carry that light back into the world. As the light began to shift again, Jesus extended his hand toward the shimmering scroll in the center of the hall. With a gesture, the golden text began to flow outward like a stream of liquid light, each word forming into vivid images that surrounded us. It was as if I were no longer an observer, but standing within the visions themselves, immersed in their meaning. The first vision unfolded before me. I was high above the earth, gazing down as though through the eyes of God. At first, the planet looked beautiful, bathed in the glow of the sun. But as I looked closer, a creeping darkness began to spread across the surface. It was thick and oppressive, moving like smoke from a fire that could not be quenched. "This is the darkness of deception," Jesus said, his voice grave. "It covers nations, clouding their minds and hardening their hearts. Lies are accepted as truth, and truth is ridiculed as lies. Even my church has not been spared." I saw churches that had once been vibrant with life, now standing silent, their doors closed. Inside, the pews were empty, and the altars had grown cold. In others, there was movement, but something was wrong. The worship seemed hollow, the words spoken twisted and self-serving. "What has happened?" I asked, grief filling my voice. "Many have traded the truth of my word for the approval of the world," Jesus replied. "They have allowed pride, greed, and fear to creep in, forgetting their first love. My people perish for lack of knowledge because they no longer seek me with all their hearts. As he spoke, another scene appeared. I saw people, millions of them, walking in a massive crowd toward a precipice. They were blinded, their eyes covered by veils of light that were not of God, but of something counterfeit. The edge of the cliff was hidden beneath these false lights, and as they marched forward, they fell, one by one, into a great abyss. "This is the great deception," Jesus said, his tone heavy with sorrow. "Many are led astray by voices that promise what their hearts desire, but lead them far from me. Beware of wolves in sheep's clothing. They come to steal, kill, and destroy." But just as the weight of despair began to consume me, the scene shifted. In the midst of the darkness, I saw small points of light scattered across the globe. They flickered at first, but grew stronger, brighter. As I focused on them, I realized they were people, God's people, praying, worshipping, and standing firm in their faith. "These are my faithful ones," Jesus said, and there was hope in his voice now. "Though they are few, they are mighty. Their prayers are like incense, rising before my throne. Through them, revival will come, and the light will push back the darkness." The vision zoomed in on one of these gatherings. I saw people from every tribe, nation, and tongue, standing hand in hand, worshipping with a unity that was breathtaking. There were no divisions, no arguments over doctrine or politics, only the pure adoration of God. "This is what I desire," Jesus said, "a church united, not by man's standards, but by my Spirit. When my people humble themselves, pray, and seek my face, I will hear from heaven and heal their land." As the scene faded, another, more alarming vision emerged. I saw natural disasters of a scale I could hardly comprehend. Earthquakes splitting cities in half, waves crashing over entire coastlines, and storms raging with unrelenting fury. Fires consumed forests and homes alike, their flames reaching higher than the tallest buildings. "These are the birth pains," Jesus said. "The earth groans under the weight of sin, and these events will increase as the time draws near. Do not fear them, but be prepared. Let these be reminders to turn your hearts fully to me." Then I saw wars, nation rising against nation, brother against brother. The sounds of gunfire and explosions were deafening, but worse than the physical violence was the spiritual battle that raged unseen. Demonic forces moved among the chaos, sowing hatred and despair. "You must understand," Jesus said, "that your battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, authorities, and powers of this dark world. Arm yourselves with the armor of God, and do not grow weary, for the victory is already mine." Finally, the most striking vision appeared. I saw a massive throne room filled with multitudes of people standing before a great throne of light. The presence of God was overwhelming, and I could feel both the weight of his justice and the depth of his love. One by one, people stepped forward, their lives laid bare before the throne. Some fell to their knees in sorrow, crying out for mercy, while others stood defiantly, their hearts hardened. "This is the day of judgment," Jesus said, his voice both tender and firm. "Every deed, every thought, and every word will be accounted for. But for those who are in me, there is no condemnation. My blood has covered their sins, and they will stand blameless before the Father." Tears streamed down my face as I watched. The love and justice of God were undeniable, and I knew then that I could not return to my life as it was before. "Go," Jesus said, turning to me, "warn them of what is to come, but do not let fear be your message. Let love and hope guide your words. For though the darkness grows, the light shines brighter still, and in the end, My kingdom will reign forever. As the visions faded and the hall around me began to dissolve, I felt the weight of the task set before me. I was being sent back, not just as a witness, but as a messenger. As the visions faded and the golden hall dissolved around me, I found myself once again standing beside Jesus and Martin Luther King. Their presence filled me with strength, and their expressions conveyed a powerful mix of urgency and hope. Jesus looked at me, his eyes filled with compassion and purpose. "The darkness is great," he said, "but it does not have the final word. My light will overcome, and I will use even the smallest flame to ignite a fire that cannot be extinguished. Tell them this truth. Every believer, no matter how ordinary they feel, carries within them the power to change the world." Dr. King stepped forward then, his voice steady and full of conviction. "Revival begins in the hearts of the faithful," he said. "It doesn't start in cathedrals or government halls, but in the quiet places of prayer, in the lives of those who dare to believe that love and justice can prevail." The vision shifted again, showing me scenes of incredible transformation. I saw small gatherings of believers praying fervently in homes, fields, and even in the midst of persecution. Their prayers were like sparks, and as they continued, those sparks turned into flames that spread across communities, cities, and nations. In one scene, I saw a young boy in a remote village, kneeling in the dirt with his hands lifted to heaven. His simple, heartfelt prayer ignited a chain reaction, touching the hearts of his family, his neighbors, and eventually his entire village. Soon, the light of faith shone brightly, dispelling the spiritual darkness that had once consumed them. In another vision, I saw a woman who had lived a life of pain and regret. She sat alone in a small church, her head bowed in shame. But as she began to pray, tears streaming down her face, the weight she carried was lifted. She stood, her heart transformed, and began to share her testimony with others. Through her, dozens came to know the love and forgiveness of Christ. "These are the stories that will shape the future," Jesus said. "It is not through power or pride, but through humility and faith that my kingdom advances." Then the vision turned to me, and I felt his words piercing my soul. "You must tell them. It is not enough to know the right words or attend church out of routine. They must surrender their lives to me completely, walking in obedience and love. Their faith must be alive, not dormant. Only then will they be prepared for what is to come." I nodded, feeling the weight of this call to action. "But Lord," I asked, "how can they do this? How can they find the strength to stand in such a dark time?" Jesus smiled gently, and his response was both simple and profound. "Tell them to seek me first, above all else. Let them immerse themselves in my word, for it is a lamp to their feet and a light to their path. Let them pray without ceasing, for prayer is the lifeline that connects them to my power. And let them love, truly love one another, for love is the greatest weapon against the darkness." Dr. King added, "Encourage them to act with courage and faith, even when the odds seem insurmountable. Tell them that justice is not just a concept, but a calling. Each act of kindness, each stand for truth, each sacrifice for the sake of others. These are the seeds of change. Remind them that they are not alone. They are part of a great cloud of witnesses who have gone before them, cheering them on as they run the race set before them." The visions shifted once more, showing practical steps believers were taking to prepare their hearts and communities. I saw families gathering around their dinner tables, reading the Bible together and discussing its truths. Children asked questions, and parents answered with wisdom and humility, planting seeds of faith that would grow for generations. I saw individuals waking early each morning to pray, pouring out their hearts to God and seeking His guidance for the day ahead. Though they faced challenges, their time with the Lord gave them strength and peace. I saw churches coming alive, not with programs or entertainment, but with genuine worship and a deep hunger for God's presence. People knelt at the altar, repenting of their sins and committing their lives fully to Christ. And I saw believers stepping out in boldness, sharing their faith with co-workers, neighbors, and even strangers. They didn't rely on eloquent words or rehearsed speeches, but simply spoke from their hearts, trusting the Holy Spirit to work through them. As the visions faded, I felt a deep sense of urgency, but also an overwhelming hope. The battle was fierce, but victory was certain. Jesus looked at me one final time. "Go and tell them," He said. "Tell them that I am coming soon. Tell them to be ready, not in fear, but in faith. Let them know that every act of love, every prayer lifted in faith, every sacrifice made for my name's sake is seen and remembered. And remind them, I am with them always, to the very end of the age." When I finally opened my eyes, I was back in my body, sitting in my car. The pain in my chest was gone, replaced by a peace I had never known. I looked around at the familiar world and realized that everything had changed. The message was clear, and the mission was urgent. It wasn't just for me, it was for all of us. The time to act is now. Seek God, pray fervently, love deeply, and live boldly. The light of Christ is within us, and together we can push back the darkness and usher in the revival that this world so desperately needs. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in the divine realm. I was back in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel as though I had never left. The shattered coffee mug lay on the pavement outside, but the pain in my chest was gone. Everything was eerily still, yet I knew my life had been forever altered. The experience I'd just had was no dream, no figment of my imagination. It was a calling, a second chance, not just to live, but to share the truth I had seen and heard. My priorities were no longer the same. The trivial concerns that had once consumed me now seemed insignificant in light of eternity. I realized that every breath we take is a gift, and every moment is an opportunity to draw closer to God and live out His purpose. Jesus' words echoed in my heart with an urgency I could not ignore. Time is shorter than you think. Be ready. Since that day, I have dedicated my life to sharing this message. I've learned to let go of fear, pride, and complacency, and to walk boldly in faith. My family has joined me in this journey, and together we've experienced the power of prayer, the joy of worship, and the peace that comes from living in obedience to God. But this isn't just my story, it's yours too. God is calling all of us to wake up, to see the world not as it is, but as He intended it to be. The darkness is real, but so is the light, and we are called to be that light, shining in the midst of chaos and confusion. So I leave you with this question. Are you ready? Are you ready to surrender your life fully to Jesus, to live with the kind of faith that moves mountains, and to stand firm in a world that so desperately needs His love and truth? The time to act is now. Don't wait for a better moment or a clearer sign. Seek Him today. Open your heart to His word. Pray with sincerity and humility. Love others with the kind of selflessness that reflects His own sacrifice. Jesus is coming soon. The question is not if, but when. Will you be ready to meet Him? The choice is yours. But remember, It's not just about avoiding the darkness. It's about embracing the light, living with purpose, and preparing for the eternal life that awaits those who put their trust in Him. I've shared my story so that you might find hope, courage, and faith. Now it's your turn to answer the call. Will you step into the light?